Hello guys, I'm Salih, welcome to TechBuddy, and in today's video I will be talking about using statements in C# and how it works. You might think that we really know how it works. You just give it something, and when you leave the scope, it's just dispose it somehow, close it, I don't know, maybe clear the memory, you might think. It actually works a bit differently, and I'm just going to show it to you how it works actually behind the scene as well. And we are going to be doing a couple of tests, and there will be some sort of points that you might need to consider about. And let's now see how using statement works. First of all, let's start with how we create the statement. Using the older former version is used to be something over here, something, and in this curly brackets, whatever we do within this curly bracket, as soon as the code scope is done after this one, whatever we created here is actually disposed somehow. I am deliberately saying dispose. It's because there's a condition to using statement. For example, let's say I have test class over here, or just user class. All right, so now I'm saying, okay, I have user class, create an instance of it, everything is all right. Now it is complaining. However, if it was file stream, for example, let's say file stream and new file stream I created, the parameters doesn't actually matter, but file mode, give it something. So now I am basically able to use the file stream within this using scope, using statement. But because of something, I'm not able to use the user, my own class. So I was deliberately saying dispose. It's because once the code block itself, the code line, leaves that curly brackets, it is calling the object's dispose methods. It's like doing the same thing here. I've created this one, and now after I'm done, I'm calling dispose method. So in this case, if I were to add a dispose method into my custom class, I should be able to use this user class over here, right? So after this line is worked, so it should be able to call user dispose method. However, there is another case over here, and it is, so this could be something, right? So not dispose, but my dispose, and it could totally be different than the actual dispose. So it could be working differently than dispose. That's the reason using block, using statement, doesn't allow me to use any object which is not using my disposable interface. It's basically forcing you to use the dispose interface, which would give you the ability to use the dispose, have the dispose method in it, and the name has to be dispose too. Within that way, so I am now able to use the dispose my user class. It's because now it has dispose function in it, and it's because now there is no complaining about it or something. Whatever I do in here doesn't matter, but the second this line works, it's going to call dispose function. So we can basically test it by, okay, saying dispose worked here, and I do something here before dispose worked. This is between this one, actually, this one. And I'm saying, okay, I created something, some object, user object. It is disposable. That's the reason I could be able to use this one in here. And I'm putting it on the output console, and this is going to be worked after this one. This is the expectation. Let me run the project and see the output actually. So it is how it's supposed to be working before dispose, and dispose worked. So the second the scope is done and it's been called. This is a way that we could make the response using statement responsible, disposing our object All right. Within this case, actually, I'm not doing anything in Dispose within this case, so it seems doesn't make sense or something. But if you remember file stream, what happens here, okay, see user.txt, let's say, and file mode open, Within that case, what happens is the second I've created this stream, it's basically now giving me ability to read the file. It's because now it is opening it. All right. So here I'm able to read the file, read the content maybe. The second the code blocks is done, code scope is done, it is going to close the file. So it's going to call this file statement, file streams dispose method, which is going to close the file on the operating level system. So the other process, other threads, other applications, or the same application could again open the file and read the content. The second, if you don't close the file after opening, it's not going to allow you to open it. It says, okay, this file is being used by another process or something. So this is how we use the using scope. And after C#9, I believe, I'm not sure, but we are now able to simplify it like that. So you could just say, okay, I've created file stream over here, or user class, or it doesn't matter what it is, but there is no curly bracket when it is going to call the curly bracket. So I'm just gonna say, okay, this is before dispose work. This was how it used to be, right? I've created this one. I say this one, and then let me just actually do this so we can now see the console output. So the expectation is to be the same actually. So before dispose worked, but if you see, it's not calling the user's dispose function. It is now because the scope itself, the using scope itself, now the whole application actually. So now it is waiting for the scope to be done. So if I were to press any key or something, actually it should be enter. If I press the enter, the scope is done after this one, and it was going to be calling this one. Let me just prove it with a function. Let's assume this is a foo. All right, so I'm doing the same thing here and calling foo here. So now I'm calling foo here. It's going to create this one. Now after that one, it's gonna call this. And let me bring the screen to you. So see now the scope where the using is defined, which is in this case these curly brackets. When the scope is done, now it is calling the dispose worked function. All right. So if you think if there would be any exception or something, do you think it was going to call this dispose function or something in any way? Let's say I am now throwing an exception here. Custom exception. What do you think to see in the screen though? Of course, we are gonna have this one. And now I'm gonna say, okay, .NET, please run my application. Now it's gonna try. It's gonna run the application called the foo. And now you are basically seeing, okay, even though, there's an exception, and now see, dispose worked actually. It was waiting for that one. Let me just clear the screen and .NET run again. So now what we are gonna see is, okay, the user class is created over here, and we call the dispose before dispose worked. We see the log here. And then the exception has been thrown. Okay, this is acceptable. But again, dispose worked. So even though there is an exception, it is still doing the user statement disposal thing. I'm not sure if it is still familiar to you, but do you think that using statement is something like we always use? Not always, but sometimes use in C#. So if I would tell you, if I have try finally block, whatever happens here, let's say, okay, I have an user class, user, let's say, and default is null. I said, okay, user now created, and I do this one, logging. And here I'm calling users dispose function. You might just check if it is not null or something. And in any case, even though there is an exception here, it's going to be calling the dispose function. So basically, the functionality with using scope is the same with try finally block. And what if I told you, I tell you that it is actually what is happening behind the scene? I'm not sure if you're using the SharpLab.io. SharpLab.io is one of the websites that shows you the IL code of high-level C#. IL means intermediate language. There are but there are many layers from your high-level C# code to machine code. There is IL level, there is JIT layer, and a couple of layers as well. But you might just say, okay, this is converting your high-level code into intermediate, so a bit lower level code. What it does is, if you define the same thing here, I bring my own class and I'm saying, okay, I have foo function here. So if you see the lower level code on the right hand side within the foo bar, the foo function, what it's doing is actually the same what I've done in C# over here with the try finally block, right? So you can see try finally, something happens in here, user just defined out of the scope, so it should be able to access it in the finally block. And if the user is not null, it is calling dispose function by casting it, boxing it to my disposable interface. That's the reason it needs to be derived by this interface. It has to have the dispose function in it, so it can call in finally block. Whatever happens within try block, it's going to call and so dispose a function or your object or whatever it is. So this is actually how it works behind the scene. I'm now just going to show you something that you need to be careful while using statement, and which is, so let's assume this gets user function and it is returning user. Instead of throwing an exception, I will be sending the user. Let me rename it. And what do you think is going to happen here? So I would have get user function. Now I'm having the user. I told you that using block, whenever it is finishing its scope, the scope it's defined, which is now get user. But I've created user and I sent it back to whoever calls me. So within this case, do you really think that the scope of using is still this one or the whole function itself? So I'm basically asking if the user is null or not here. Var is null. So what do you think we are going to see in the screen, in the output? Yes. And the output is, all right, this is a sort of trait actually. So it worked, so it called the dispose function, but it is still not disposed. It's called it calls the dispose function, but it is not null. And the reason being is actually, I was not doing anything over here, but I could have dispose property in it, and I would be basically setting it over here, said, okay, it is disposed now. So the being null and dispose is two different things that you might think. So, but if I checked, if let's say I have public property and it's Boolean and say is disposed, and basically I'm returning it, let's do something like that. Bool is disposed, doesn't have to be read only, it's now going to return this one to encapsulation, and this is going to be true here, and on the construction it should be false, or the default value should be false, right? So both would be the same. So now I'm, instead of checking if it is null, I would be basically checking if it's disposed. So this is now going to be as expected. So it is, I mean, not null, but is disposed to be, say. All right, so now we know how to use using. If we are returning anything back, we should be consider using, not using the using statement, I would say. It's because as soon as the scope is done, which is where it defines, where it is defined, it's going to call the dispose function. You might have something over here. So you would basically, I don't know, do something that user now is not able to, is not usable by someone else. You just basically close the stream, close the file, you might say. So instead of get user, it could be file stream, right? So get file it could be, and I could be using the var fs, let's say file stream, and reading a file from somewhere, file txt, and file mode is, oops, it doesn't really matter actually, but file mode open, and return the file. And now here I am getting it. So now read at least, or read something. Over here I shouldn't be able to read the file. It's because I created the file stream over here with an open mode, but as soon as the scope is done here, so now it's disposed. When it is disposed, it doesn't allow me to read the content. So it's because it is now it's just basically lost the connection to the file on the operating system level. So this is where you need to consider using the using statement. If you are returning something, you should not create it within the using statement. So if this is the case, now in line 5, now I'm able to read everything, I do everything. But please do not forget dispose, call dispose, or if it has close function, you would do the same. Behind the scene, they probably do the same, but those are totally different things. But you just get what I mean, actually. If you like the video, please hit the like button. And if you have any question about this video, what I talk about today, and you might just ask your questions in the comment section. And also you might just put something over there that you would like to see in the next videos. I'm having a sort of plan for future videos, but you could just suggest me something that I can make a video about. And if you are not already a subscriber, please subscribe the video channel, I mean. So I'll see you in the next video.